All right, back here on the Newsfeed PM, and thanks for staying on. Civil society organizations, including Abahlali Basemjondolo Equal Education and Right to Know campaign, have joined the first National Dialogue Convention, though with significant reservations. In a joint statement, they described the dialogue as flawed but necessary, insisting that grassroots voices of the poor and working class must take center stage. They warn against elite capture and empty rhetoric and call instead for urgent, tangible action on hunger, poverty, and accountability. Joining us now to talk more on this is the Director of Open Secrets, Hennie van Vuuren. Hennie, good to have you. Thank you very much for your time. Abahlali Basemjondolo promising that their participation in this process is going to flip things around in this particular process. I mean, have you seen any flipping around of the process as far as your watching, at least in the past 2 days, in terms of the structure of how this national convention would have been formed, the form that it took in terms of the breakaways, the discussions, in terms of representation, as well as, I suppose, we'll hear by Thursday next week what the mandates would be.
Yeah, Thabo, good afternoon. I think, for us as Open Secrets, we kind of scratch our head like many South Africans and look at this process and wonder, what are we doing here? We all know there's a big price ticket involved here. What will ultimately be maybe 500 million rand that'll be spent on a series of events. It does feel like we've convened a workshop to discuss problems which we all know we have in South Africa. And as someone who works in civil society and has had to sit through many dreadful workshops in my life, I do wonder whether the public should be subsidizing people to sit at UNISA for these 2 days and speak to the problems which we all know exist. We know that there are 28 million South Africans who rely on social grants every day, precisely because they don't have the work opportunities that they need. There are, by any account, roughly 35% of people are unemployed. The question is, how do we fix this? How do we go about doing that? And I think the curious part when we look at this is we wonder, we've mandated the state to come up with a plan, which was the National Development Plan. We paid for that. All South Africans paid for that process. Now, we don't have anything on the table. So the state, together with civil society groups, and this is using public money, have convened a meeting. We don't yet know what the outcome is. If there had been at least something well thought through in advance that really said, look, these are the 4 or 5 key things that we want to change in our society. And to do that, we need to bring the very powerful people in the country. That means the people who run the economy, the big corporations, the richest South Africans, to sit with the people who run the big public institutions, and to hear from working South Africans what their view is on what needs to change. And that isn't going to happen in one-off conference. That's going to be a whole different way to approach it. I think that would be meaningful. Yeah. But right now, all that we have set up is a bunch of workshops. And I think they work well for people who have access to government, who have access to power already, to make their voices heard even louder. But whether we're going to fundamentally tackle the real problems, frankly, I doubt it. And that's not because I say that this is not a cynical approach at all, Thabo. I think one has great care and concern for the things that need to change. Yeah. But we could rather have taken that money and given every single South African a free loaf of bread instead of sending people to UNISA to ponder again about what our problem is.
And that's a very telling critique. I mean, a very important one as well, because up till so far, I mean, many people will say the way that the national conversation would have been designed would be myself, yourself. We can engage on this platform, and I can be able to call a government official to come on board, and I can be able to call another neutral party, and you have a debate, you debate it out in this forum, or there could be other forums that are set where this happens. But the argument has been that so far how it has been designed is that this space only allows those whose voices are amplified and can be heard, but it excludes a large majority of the people of South Africa. And so this is an attempt at a process that would be more inclusive.
Absolutely, and I mean, look, I should stress we as a small civil society organization investigating economic crime made a decision not to engage in this process. We weren't invited, and we didn't ask to be invited either. And I think it's precisely for those reasons that there are platforms like this, but many others where South Africans are speaking and listening to one another. I think we need a robust national debate that takes place. But this isn't a debating show that's been organized, right? This is supposed to be a forum that is supposed to arrive at some of the problems that we have, fixing the problems that we have. And Thabo, I mean, I think it's in its very conception was problematic. And I do want to go back. When we think about the involvement of former President Thabo Mbeki and his foundation, that's all good and well that they could call for a national dialogue. But for a period, Thabo Mbeki drove this process from what we can understand with some of the family legacy foundations. To put it very clearly on the agenda as well, Thabo, we would question. We haven't even started to unpick the former president's legacy in terms of the impact of his denial of HIV/AIDS medicines. We know that 300,000 South Africans lost their lives during his tenure as president due to preventable actions that he could have taken and his ministers could have taken. We had big corruption in the arms deal at that point. We had interference in the work of the National Prosecuting Authority, according to Vusi Pikoli, who was then the head of the Prosecuting Authority, which meant that we weren't prosecuting people for apartheid crimes. It's not a clean record of governance that Thabo Mbeki has left behind. Now, I also think it's quite problematic that a lot of things have come to hinge on the likes of the former president and other political parties, for example, who want to be in or out of this dialogue. From its outset, I think the question is, what are you trying to achieve? We can't just have a conversation. We need a plan, and we need a plan that deals with issues of inequality in our society, that tackles the debt that ordinary South Africans are sitting in, that deals with the issues of unemployment, and that fundamentally changes the way our society works. You can't have some people having as much wealth as we have in our country and other people having absolutely nothing. And that doesn't seem to be the outset of the discussion, where it is the state is sitting down, again, with big private actors. It's the people who really have the money and who represent them, the big institutions, and say, you are sitting on vast amount of capital that needs to be unlocked and needs to be invested. And we're going to deliver a new social compact that wants to see how that investment takes place. And civil society groups and social movements, there's an inclusive process that arrives at that. That would be a truly national dialogue that tries to reset things. But again, I think this process of workshopping, haphazard, poorly organized, no real strategy and direction, frankly looks a little bit like a shambles. And for the public monies that are invested in this, I think could have been put to far better use than what we've seen thus far.
Okay, we also have joining us National Coordinator at Right to Know, Sthembiso Khuluse. Sthembiso, welcome to you, and thank you very much for coming on. I spoke to the ANC's Veterans President, Dr. Snuki Zikalala. He says that this was a call by civil society. They are the ones who said, look, we want to have this conversation and we don't want it to be led by politicians. We want it to be citizens-led. So the president says under Section 83, I certainly can do that. So it was for the president to oblige. Then I spoke to Mzwanele Manyi. Mzwanele Manyi says, no, it's a jamboree and a waste of money and not even following the proper processes of acquiring money as far as the PFMA is concerned. Now, the two sides feel that one, we should have it, the other one feel that we have a better process called the National Assembly, where these issues could have been ironed out and we can have broad community engagement and so on and so forth. Where do you sit on that?
Okay, evening and thanks for having us. And also greetings to everybody at home. So look, as civil society, in the first place, even before this dialogue, we had so much concerns. Even if you can look at our statement that we released yesterday, we raised so many concerns about this dialogue. Firstly, what we can say is that such initiatives to get people talking and having their views in what is happening in their country and what is affecting them in their lives, it's a very important initiative. But the problem is that such initiative, most of the time, they end up being a show just to spend money and to pretend as if the government is doing something. So hence, as civil society, even though we had our concern even before the national dialogue, because we also felt that the way that it's been set up and the way that it's been organized, it doesn't really reflect the consent on the ground and the people that should be represented. And also what I want to raise initially is that for us as civil society, going to join that national dialogue was not in any way to legitimize it, but also we wanted to go inside there because we wanted to have our voice heard, because we represent different sectors of society. And people, most of the time, their voices are being muted. So we said, no, let's decide to go and fight inside instead of staying outside. Even for us, I had also my colleagues saying they were never invited. Even for us, we were invited at the last minute. We had to sit down and have a discussion as civil society to say, listen, do we go inside there and argue inside, if need be, to collapse it, let's collapse it from the inside, or do we stay out because it's going to continue anyway? Even if we go there, even if we don't go there, it's going to continue anyway. So it was important for us to go there and have our voice and try and make sure that it is people-centered, because these are public funds that are being used. Because also we had, if you look back, there were so many summits that have been called. There was a gender summit, there was a job summit, there was a investment conference, but how did it end? And we were not participating in those things because we sat outside. So this time we said, no, this is public funds. It's going to be used anyway with us or not with us there. So let's go inside there and try to make our voice heard and represent the people that we represent from different societies of our nation.
Yeah, but there are those who are saying, well, this attempt, even with your involvement in your part and your voice being amplified, will really go to, as far as process is concerned, reaching as many people as possible. But the numbers themselves then will just become the objective that we spoke to so many people, so many voices were heard, but there's no real plan as to what will happen after that.
Yes, in terms of planning and processes, I agree with you there. We also felt, even inside within the dialogue, that the planning was poor and it was rushed, and the process moving forward, because when you go to such events, you also look at the methodologies to take us forward. As civil society, when we were sitting there, you could sense that there is no real clear strategy to take this forward. But most of the time, what they were talking about is about mobilizing, going on the ground. You even had the president talking about that this dialogue should happen even under the trees, in churches. So those are very sensitive spaces. And we don't want them to be manipulated for political purposes. In terms of numbers, look, even though if the civil societies were not there or other set up, they were going to get the numbers anyway, because even yesterday, I think they were expecting about 1,000 numbers, but it's reached more. So, but what is important, they cannot say because we were there as civil society, then it's a stem or it's an endorsement. Because even from within, even the interviews that we were making, even our voice that we were raising, even the statements that we were raising, still participating in the dialogue, it was telling the truth about what is happening within and what people are not aware of. So for us is to make sure that the public is informed, is to get a true picture of what is happening. Because if you are not there, who's going to tell the communities what is happening? It's going to be another show of the government spending public funds.
Yeah. Hennie, can this process still be salvaged even at this point?
Well, I'm not sure what would be done to salvage something that hasn't really taken off at all. I mean, I don't think the ship has left the harbor by any means. I agree with Sthembiso that there have been umpteen of these type of convenings. This is what characterizes the presidency of Cyril Ramaphosa, unfortunately, because ultimately he is allowing the public funds to be utilized to organize this event. Lots of talking, very little doing. Let me use just one, if I can, Tabo, one example. In December last year, there was a national anti-corruption summit, which was another one of these talk shops. 600 people met in Khuluse to discuss the plans to tackle corruption. A plan had been given to President Ramaphosa by his own National Anti-Corruption Advisory Committee, I think about 9 months before that meeting. It sat on his desk. We all waited at the meeting. The plan was never even presented. That's why we were there at the meeting to discuss this so-called plan. I mean, an absolute shambles and a waste of time and money. I don't say that lightly again. I think we see this sort of type of behavior. We shouldn't be, I think, caught out by these type of convenings that are supposed to give us the sense of democracy. But substantively, there's little that is properly discussed, and certainly there's no direction given to how we are going to change our society and challenge unjust power in our society. And I think that's the work of civil society that we need to be taking forward, and that isn't going to happen in a workshop waiting around for buffet lunch.
Appreciate your time both, and much appreciated for coming on. The Director of Open Secrets, Hennie van Vuuren, National Coordinator for Right to Know, Sthembiso Khuluse there.